When I came to this website, I was just a boy. I was a little shitty lion archetype, that fucking Simba, what the fuck, in Disney movies. I was fucking raised up there by the monkey to look around, and what did I see? I see these big bazungas, these big breasts, on these girls playing video games. That's where I came here for, and I like games, and I really felt an immediate connection with these girls. I thought, I'm gonna let them meet my parents, we're gonna walk around and hold hands by the local pond. That's what I thought. It was all a lie. I was just a boy. I was just a shitty little lion who didn't know what was going on. But since then, I really got my fucking main neckbeard of wisdom. And how did that happen? I found my first red pill. I realized that this website isn't just about videos, but that there's an undercurrent of profound wisdom that we have to leap into to really, straighten up our posture, because the lobsters do it and shit like that. And these elders, these wise men of YouTube, these YouTube intellectuals have really led me to this realization, have really made me mature and realize what's going on out there. I had no meaning in my life before I started watching these videos. I'm so angry about this shit. If somebody questions somebody like Professor Peterson, I'll fucking type out, and it's like, fucking clean your room, bucko. That's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna type out if somebody criticizes Professor Peterson, because I'm in my late 20s and that's what I do. Clean your room, bucko. My avatar is a fucking Pepe meme that should be fucking dead already, that should be buried with Hitler in the bunker. I'm sure there is already a meme for that, but it should be reality. It should just go away, this fucking frog. Well, anyway, so this is just hypothetical shit, but the reality is this. Over my lifespan on YouTube, over my algorithm journey, these people have become family to me. Now let's take Sargon of Akkad, for example. Sargon, he's just like your older brother. He's just that kind of older neckbeard, kind of smug, kind of full of himself. You always kind of want to kick him in the ass a little bit, but playfully. Just gonna, nudge him around, fucking bully him around a little bit, fucking, just kind of pull him around in different fucking directions, pull on his fucking ears, fucking slap him around. But in the end, he's just a smart guy. He's just a clever guy. He has that English accent. I tune into Sargon. It's like, it's the shit I already know, but he can say it better. Sargon, he's just like that guy, a little bit full of himself, but just a good guy. He's a liberalist. That's Sargon. He's going into politics now. He really kind of gave me a lot of red pills. Sargon did. Well, that's Sargon of Akkad. He's just that kind of a lovable nerd, kind of a bit full of himself, but he's smart. Oh, he's really smart. And then you have Jordan Peterson, of course, his dad. What is dad doing in the study alone? Is he masturbating? Don't be a fucking smartass. No, he's not. He's contemplating the darkness of the world. He's very fucking dark. He's very deep. It's like, why should you straighten up your posture? It's the lobsters. Let's clean your room, bucko. That's his fucking, he really went deep into the dark self, into the shadow self of humanity. And that's what he came up with. It's like, fucking clean your room, bucko. That's what he kind of dove deep in there. Eat beef.
No, I eat beef and salt and water. That's it.
This is when you really plunge into the darkness of man, like Jordan Peterson had. This is what you come up with. This is what you surface with. Fucking lobsters, fucking clean your room, bucko. Yeah, that's Peterson is dead, and that's what he's doing.
And I carry beef jerky with me, which we make.
Peterson is dead. And then you have Stefan Molyneux, of course. Now, Stefan Molyneux is kind of like that creepy uncle who kind of seems like he's gonna molest you. But actually, he really... Well, it's Stefan, okay? He just seems like it, but in reality, no. Well, this is kind of where we really discover ourselves with these guys.
Vampiric whisker-based walrus constantly, are there any young people around? Hey, Daddy needs some blood. I need some blood for my moral posturing. Where are the young? Fresh blood. Vampiric whisker-based walrus.
And over time, certain YouTube sciences, certain YouTube disciplines of thought really emerge from this ether of red pills. They just rise like a phoenix, these different YouTube sciences. and YouTube disciplines that we all carefully study and that really define our existence. They just change who we are. So the first science is a little bit antiquated by now, but this is the science of Anita Sarkeesian. This is when we really carefully study this one person, Anita Sarkeesian.
But there's been a bit of an interesting development with Miss Sarkeesian, if you'd like to hear about it.
Well, Pete, tell people who she is.
I don't even know if I need to, but
most people don't know.
Well,
need I tell you, dude, that she pretends to play video games but really doesn't? It's just one step on her agenda, her political agenda. It's like there is this behavior we have, like goal-oriented behavior that has evolved with us as a species, where we need to pursue different goals. And then these giant corporations injected pixels into it, and now there are these alternative worlds where you pursue different goals. It has nothing to do with life whatsoever, but it gives us our evolutionary reward, kind of like chasing some shitty antelope, because that's what we did. So now there's these whole pixelated worlds that kind of where we dwell. So we spent hours of our lives in there. And sometimes we do this meaningful activity while playing as a hot broad. We want to see hot broads in there in this world. Now that we're fucking in here, playing these games, pursuing this goal-oriented behavior that has nothing to do with outside world, now that we're fucking here, I want to see some fucking tits, I want to see some ass and legs on these virtual characters. That's what I want to see. And fucking Anita Sarkeesian comes in here on her stupid fucking Mario Kart and says, oh, fuck you. Well, Wii isn't a real console, cunt. And if you were a video game, you would be Sonic the douche hog. Get out of here, Anita, you stupid bitch.
why do they still prop her up? Because she's Anita Sarkeesian. If she goes
doesn't
down,
make any sense. What does that mean?
Well,
Get out of here with your fucking feminist frequency. Hey Anita, if your ancestral homeland of Armenia was a terrain in World of Warcraft, I wouldn't fucking go to that shithole. It's lame, it's fucking poor, well, it fucking sucks, okay? Well, does that hurt? Well, it hurts me when you interject your politics into my hobby.
I've spoken to a lot of interesting people recently since I've been here.
Yeah.
A lot of people who know you personally, Anita, and they say everyone hates you because you're a dick.
Oh, this is getting mean.
Even with all of that aside, Anita, the gaming industry has moved on, and it's a real big hoochie train heading in my direction. You have no idea how much tail I got in Dragon Age Inquisition.
There's a mythos that's built up around her. Calling me, she called me a shithead, she called me a garbage human.
A garbage human?
I did nothing to her.
Well, that's the science of Anita Sarkeesian. We don't care about her like we once did. We're not as committed to studying Anita in every detail like we did a couple of years ago. It's just not as important to us. But that memory of the science of Anita Sarkeesian, of our YouTube study of this discipline, will never go away. Because, like, when Rome started, there was some fucking dog and two douchebags were sucking on its tits for some reason. Well, this is when we spit out Anita's milk at the foundation and said, fuck you, we're individuals. We're gonna listen to the same shit over and over again for the next couple of years and more. And this brings us to the second science. And that's, of course, the science of the ladies. Here on YouTube, we're constantly trying to figure out how to unlock this Pandora's box of the opposite sex.
The mating situation, let's say, extraordinarily complicated and also quite tragic and even catastrophic. But there's no easy solution on the horizon. It's not like anybody knows what to do about it.
Why can't things be as linear as Assassin's Creed?
Welcome home.
Why? Why can't they? Like we have assigned inner worth to ourselves, and then women refuse to have sex with us because of it. What's the deal here? Oh, it's hypergamy. It's fucking hypergamy is what's going on.
Chimpanzee females are non-discriminate maters. They'll mate with any male. When they go into heat, which human females don't, when they go into heat, then any male is allowed access. Now the dominant males chase the subordinate males away, and so the dominant males are more likely to leave offspring, but it's not because of the female choice. It's not the case with human beings. Human females engage in hypergamy, and hypergamy is and this is also true cross-culturally, and it's also quite, it's just as extensive in Scandinavia. Not quite, there's a bit of attenuation, but not much. Women mate across and up dominance hierarchies. Men mate across and down. Okay, and that has to be the case because obviously it has to work that way.
It's just, I used to feel so much for women, and I used to be so open to them, but now they're just cold cunts as I grow older. They're just kind of, they walk around past me and hardly notice anything about me, and that's why I need Stefan Molyneux and Jordan Peterson to analyze this for me, to analyze this deep, tender loneliness within me. And that's our second fucking YouTube science. Give it up for the science of the ladies, always studying the ladies, always kind of implying that they're slutty.
The fact that I don't like the fact that that's sex education in school. I mean, I really, really don't. Leftists, right? They want to hypersexualize childhood. It's how you make women unmarriable, is you expose them to a lot of sexual information when they're children, and then they have a lot of sex, and then they're unmarriable, or at least the marriages that you're going to have are going to be largely unstable, because the more sexual partners a woman has, the less fit she is to be a wife and a mother.
And this brings us to the third and final science, the YouTube science that has changed our life, that we have been very carefully studying here on YouTube, a lot of videos about it, a lot of discussions about this. And this, of course, is IQ. The reason IQ is awesome is because it scientifically confirms our racism. It's fucking awesome. Now we have a fucking number for each race. And it also gives us an internal sense of value based on doing nothing. What's your IQ? Do you know your IQ score? It doesn't fucking matter you're white. Magically, your IQ score is at 100, even though half of white people have a IQ below that. But it's what we have been assigned, and we're gonna roll with it, baby. We're gonna roll with it. And today, Jordan Peterson and Stefan Molyneux are gonna discuss this thing. And of course, just by listening to them, you know your IQ is higher than the average. Just by having, it's like an internal club. When anybody talks about IQ, you know you're in that club of high IQ individuals who looks down at the plebs below you. And it's so sweet that when these plebs are multiracial, if you know what I mean. Well, that's kind of the subtext, I guess, to a lot of this shit.
Well, there's another issue too that goes along with identity politics to some degree here, that this stratification of society is starting to reflect, because I pointed out earlier that the best predictor of long-term life success economically is intelligence and trait conscientiousness. But that also means that our culture is stratifying meritocratically. And there's some things about this that we really have to take seriously, and this is where some of the uglier elements of science become germane. So IQ is a particularly ugly aspect of science, because the IQ literature reveals that which no one would want to be the case, which is that there are profound and virtually irremediable differences in people's cognitive performance, and that those differences have a very solid biological and heritable basis. No one wants to hear that. They don't want to hear that it's biological. They don't want to hear that it's heritable. They don't want to hear it's permanent. They don't want to hear that it's irremediable and that it actually has a practical consequence.
Peterson, baby, a lot of people do want to hear it. They really do want to hear it. Like, for example, the person you're interacting with, as you say that, a lot of people want to hear it. A lot of people want to hear that they don't want to hear it. A lot of people have assigned a big brain to themselves. And that's just such a heavy burden. They don't want to hear it, but they kind of want to hear it because they've achieved nothing in their life. And it's really nice to have a nice identification by your skin tone. They really want to hear it, Peterson. You're wrong. People do want to hear this shit.
And no wonder they don't want to hear it.
Well, and even worse, they don't want to hear that it differs between genders and ethnicities. That is, to me, one of the most painful things that I've ever learned in my life. That is, to me, one of the most painful things that I've ever learned in my life. Is this kind of information. It is one of the great heartbreaks when it comes to the dream of pure egalitarianism, and that is, I think, even harder. It's an even harder pill for people to swallow.
Yeah, well, the gender differences in IQ look relatively trivial, but there are differences in ethnicity that don't look trivial. The Ashkenazi Jews, for example, have on average a 15-point advantage over the rest of the Caucasian population, which is sufficient to account for their radical overrepresentation in positions of authority and influence and productivity, you know. And I am, just so that it's absolutely clear, I am not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying there's a real reason for it that no one wants to contend with.
Well,
okay,
and it's particularly, sorry, for the Ashkenazis, it's particularly focused on language abilities, and this this reflects their, quote, overrepresentation, although if you normalize by IQ, it's not the case in the arts, in novel writing, in speech writing, and so on. Ashkenazi Jews don't have a significantly strong advantage in spatial reasoning, which is one of the reasons why you'll hear a lot about Jewish writers, but not a lot about Jewish engineers. That talent seems to have spread to the East Asians in particular, who have, this is why, 40% of Google's workforce is East Asian, because there are these biological differences. And
so let me pause Stefan here for a minute so I can explain to you why he is a complete and utter moron who doesn't understand IQ. So what Stefan said is that Jews who have a 15-point difference from Europeans in terms of average IQ, which is huge. It really is a lot. And what he said is that Jews don't have a significant advantage in spatial ability, whatever. What they do have an advantage is in verbal ability. I don't remember all the fancy fucking technical term for this. But this is complete bullshit. This would invalidate the whole idea of IQ if what he said was true. Because the whole idea of IQ, the underlying idea, is that there are no multiple intelligences. That is to say, if I have a higher than average IQ when it comes to conceptual verbal reasoning, then I will have a higher than average performance on other tasks as well. I might not have as high of a performance, but I would have a comparably significant advantage, because that would altogether show that there is a general intelligence that I possess, that it is either average, higher than average, below average. If everything was just chaotic, if one skill, verbal intelligence, could pull the Ashkenazi Jews by 15 IQ points, 15, which is, again, it's fucking huge. If that were possible, the whole idea of IQ would be invalidated, because there has to be the underlying G factor, general intelligence factor, that underlines your performance in all of these tests. Now, you're going to be higher in some of them, but overall, if you're above average, you're going to be above average on all of them.
Around the turn of the 20th century, British psychologist Charles Spearman suggested that yes, we do have one comprehensive general intelligence that underlies all of our specific mental abilities. He called it the G factor. Spearman conceded that while people may have special talents like basket weaving or saxophone solos or doing crossword puzzles, those things still fell under G. And he helped develop a statistical procedure called factor analysis to try to determine how certain clusters of skills might correlate with another one. Like, say, someone who tests well in spatial skills might be good with numbers. We might then refer to that cluster of skills, that factor, as spatial numeric reasoning. But to Spearman, the G factor was something of an uber factor, connected to all intelligent behavior from architecture to healing to survival skills, and it's why people who do well on one kind of cognitive test tend to do well on others.
Jews don't have solely an advantage in verbal intelligence. Now, there are a lot of stupid Jews around, a lot of goofy Jews, but Stefan insists on looking at everything from a population level. If that's what we're talking about, on the population level, if you really worship at the mountain of IQ, then you should rename your bulls Isaac and take them to the top of the mountains to be sacrificed to the Hebrew hammer. because Jews have, out of a population of less than 1% of the world population, I think it's like 0.2% of the world population or something, they have over 20% of Nobel laureates in physics, over 20% in chemistry, over 20% in medicine.
And how do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in one word. Tradition! 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 Tradition!
Fucking Stefan talks about Asians who work in Google. Fucking Google was started by two Jews who developed the original algorithm. So if you really want to worship at the mountain of IQ, then you gotta worship Ashkenazi Jews, because they're performing way out of proportion with their population. But you see, that's exactly the one thing that Stefan doesn't want to do, because this wasn't the one-off performance where he tried to pull this Jews only have a verbal advantage card. No, he kind of brings it up all the time.
The question of ethnicity and IQ is a whole layer cake. You know, just very briefly, the very top, the Ashkenazi Jews, this is the Jews that are the wandering Jews, so to speak. The Ashkenazi Jews...
You're sitting across from an Ashkenazi Jew. Can you feel the IQ just, you know?
As a Caucasian, I really need to go slow.
Yeah.
I love lots of subtitles. Hand puppets help as well. So, yeah, Ashkenazi Jews, as you know, and the science is like 150 in IQ on average, but lower on spatial reasoning. Mm-hmm. You know, there's not a lot of famous Jewish architects or engineers. And then under that, you have, I don't know, the word Orientals kind of come out of favor, which is kind of annoying in a way.
Part of the appeal of this whole YouTube IQ science is to feel yourself superior to other races by doing nothing. But if there are just fucking these Ashkenazi Jews floating above you, well, that's a problem.
But it's a tradition. And because of our traditions, every one of us knows who he is and what God expects him to do.
Who day and night must scramble for a living, feed a wife and children, say his daily prayers, and who has the right, as master of the house, to have the final word at home. The Papa! The Papa! Tradition! The Papa! The Papa! Tradition! Who must know the way to make a proper home, a quiet home, a kosher home?
It's a problem because they're Jews, and of course if you say that they have high verbal intelligence, then you can explain why they run the media. So I honestly think that this is where Stefan is going, but this is utter and complete bullshit. The whole idea of IQ would be undermined if just one factor could fucking pull you 15 points above 100. That's ludicrous, Stefan. You're a fucking goofball. You're a fucking dumbass.
This is something that has been so strenuously avoided since, I guess, the bell curve first came out 20-odd years ago. And I think the consequences of avoiding it, it's the old thing, give you a short-term benefit, but the long-term catastrophes, I think, are still accumulating.
Vampiric whisker-based walrus.
So one of the problems with the stratification is that, okay, so let me give you an example here. It's illegal in the United States to induct anyone in the armed forces who has an IQ of less than 83. And the reason for this is that despite the fact that the armed forces has been desperate for bodies since its inception and is still desperate, and in peacetime and in wartime, and that the armed forces has been used as a social mechanism for moving people out of the underclass into the lower middle class, let's say. And I'm pointing that out just to state forthrightly that the armed forces, above all, had every reason not to want this to be the case. They determined after approximately 100 years of study that anyone with an IQ of 83 or less couldn't be trained to do anything that wasn't positively counterproductive in the armed forces. And that should actually that should send a shudder of terror through everyone's heart, because
it should send a shudder of terror through everyone's heart. I thought it just sent a shudder of smug laughter from high IQ Stefan, laughing at the imbeciles, laughing at the morons over there before he returned to his serious face of listening to Professor Peterson. He didn't realize at first, Stefan didn't realize he was supposed to feel a shudder of terror. He just had the smug high IQ laughter.
Positively counterproductive in the armed forces. And that should send a shudder of terror through everyone's heart, because an IQ of 83 puts you in the bottom 10% of the population. That's 1 in 10 people, and we're building a very cognitively complex society. And in that cognitively complex society, there's less and less room for the gainful employment of people who don't have the capacity to contend with cognitive complexity.
Generally speaking, I don't have a huge amount of issues with what Peterson is saying here. I think he does make some decent points, even though they're not original to him. But I do want to say, Peterson, what a goofball. What kind of an example is this to show kind of cognitive stratification and high IQ people getting away with everything, when you just presented the idea that 100% of the US population is not eligible to join the military? Wouldn't it be ridiculous if literally the whole IQ spectrum would be able to join the military? I mean, when you go below 80 IQ points, I mean, some of the people there are going to be actually mentally deficient in real way, like they have an extra chromosome. I mean, it really includes a lot of people in that 10% who really are on disability anyway. It's almost like Peterson is insulting the military. He's like, I've looked around for the most retarded institution there is, and even there some people are excluded. Well, shit. I mean, there have to be some people who are fucking excluded, and it didn't seem to me like to be an overwhelming amount.
And if the army could train them and increase things and change things, to me, IQ is similar to height. You know, there's some environmental factors, but you can't make someone taller than their genetics allow as a whole. And so if the army could change that IQ, they'd have a massive incentive to do so, but nobody knows how to do it on any perpetual basis.
We've also seen repeated attempts by scientists and let's call them biological engineers, technical engineers, to try to produce exercises that would increase IQ. And basically the data is pretty clear, and it's also dismal. If you train people on cognitive tasks, complex cognitive tasks, you can generally increase the degree to which they can perform a specific cognitive task immensely. So with practice, and you see this with video games because they're complex cognitive tasks, you can get unbelievably good at a video game. Even something like a maze game, which is quite tightly associated with intelligence as a measurement. Like if you use maze performance as a measurement of IQ, it's pretty tightly associated with IQ. But despite that, that kind of training does not produce an increment in actual IQ, in general intelligence. And even if you train people across a bunch of different cognitive domains intensely, you don't get any generalization to IQ. And that's such a disappointing finding, because what you'd really hope, especially with computational technology, is that you could train people intensely to utilize their cognitive resources, using specific training exercises, and get a general increment. Just like if you train weights, you're going to get a general increment in strength. Doesn't happen.
So once again, Peterson kind of gave a goofy example of this problem, because again, he's arguing for the tragedy of people with lower IQ not being able to modify it. However, here he presented an example that a person with a lower IQ, if given a specialized skill, they can increase the level of that skill performance above their IQ if they specialize on that skill. This is actually not a horrible thing whatsoever. If you can train a person to do a fucking job and he can do it better than another person of a higher IQ level who hasn't had training in that job, that doesn't seem to me to be too bad.
So we have a really profound problem that, again, no one's willing to talk about, and that's the cognitive stratification of society. And of course, that was laid out to some degree in the bell curve back in the 1990s. But see, on the liberal end, everybody wants to believe that everyone's the same and that you can just train anyone to do everything. And then on the conservative end, everyone wants to believe that if you just got off your ass and looked for a job, there'd be a position for you. And unfortunately, that's just simply not the case. And so there's something about that, well, I don't have a solution to that, but I at least can point out the problem.
That actually was one of the few insightful things I've ever heard Peterson say. I do think there's a lot of logic to what he said just now. It's a reasonable thing for Peterson or anybody else to say. And you can see the philosophical divisions in the contemplation of IQ between Peterson and Stefan. Because Stefan immediately, like out of the gate, he had that premature ejaculation. He's like, isn't it so sad that different ethnicities and women, basically lack IQ? I mean, he didn't say it in those very words, but that's essential. Whereas Peterson is talking about more of this idea of, in an increasingly technological age, people are living in different strata, in different worlds now, based on their cognitive performance, and there is a degree of truth to that. I mean, you think about all these fucking yuppies living in a completely different universe. But that being said, the world has always been stratified, there has always been inequality, and maybe this is not the worst form of inequality out there. So finally, I'll give you my 2 cents on IQ. A long time ago when I was in college, I think as a freshman or whatever, I've read this book, The Bell Curve. It was an interesting read. I was mildly interested in the topic of IQ. And I do want to say in defense of that book, even though it has brought this whole IQ question to the general audience when it was published in the 1990s, contrary to what many leftists seem to say or imply, it really wasn't focused on race. It was focused on this very argument Peterson was talking about the general inequalities in IQ and how it affects society moving forward. It had one chapter about race and ethnicity, it did, but most of it was this kind of the concern Peterson is expressing here. What's going to happen with society as it gets more technologically advanced and people with lower cognitive capacities are left behind. And in the bell curve, they constantly referenced, and I don't know to what extent this is true or it was their projection on the past, but they said, back in the day you had these mixed, more or less IQ neighborhoods, you could say, with people with doctors living next to whatever. Now everybody's moving out and there are these real distinctions by educational attainment and so on. Peterson's concern is more general. Stefan's is really focused on race and gender and these inequalities that really give him a lot of smug chuckles and a lot of kind of, oh, isn't it horrible, this inequality, and isn't it fucking so horrible sitting on this high IQ throne looking down on everyone, that kind of shit. But I don't think IQ is total bullshit, contrary to what Stefan implied there with the Jews. If you have above average performance on one category of cognitive skills, you have a high chance, high probability of performing above average in another form. So this suggests that there is a general cognitive computing capacity that might have specializations for a person, but nevertheless is there, and that's a major finding. IQ tests and scores do have predictive capacity for a person's life. So I don't think it's complete garbage, but I'm just kind of done with the whole population genetics and comparing of populations, because it doesn't lead you to a good place. But that being said, saying that genetics and IQ are completely disconnected, it really doesn't make sense.
So let's look at the scientific evidence, and the best place for that is the wealth of twin and adoption studies, which have been fascinatingly helpful in illustrating how genetics and environment can both influence intelligence. For example, research has shown that identical twins who were raised together have the highest rate of similarity in intelligence scores of any group. Fraternal twins who share only half the genes tend to be much less similar in their scores, even when raised in the same home. Likewise, neuroimaging studies show that certain brain regions, like those associated with language, are structurally similar between identical twins and show similar activity while doing the same kinds of mental tasks. The brains of fraternal twins raised in the same home are very similar in some areas, but less so in others. But identical twins who are raised together have the same brain, at least according to neuroimaging scans. Some studies even show that identical twins raised apart from each other show higher intelligence correlation than fraternal twins raised together. And maybe even more interesting is that these intelligence correlations actually increase over time. In one mega study of 11,000 twin pairs in 4 countries, that correlation kept increasing from middle childhood to adolescence to young adulthood and continued to increase through adulthood. Similar research has looked at adopted children and compared their scores with those of their adopted adoptive siblings, parents, and biological parents. And the results can be kind of surprising, because as adopted kids grow up, their mental similarities to their adoptive families actually get smaller over time until there's virtually no correlation by adulthood. Instead, they become more similar in terms of mental aptitude to their biological parents over time, even if they'd never met. In other words, genes appear to matter. You could take 100 kids and raise them in the exact same way, and as adults, they'd still have different aptitudes.
Probably some genetics involved, but that's me, I'm sorry. I'm on the left, but I don't always have linear leftist beliefs on everything, and this could be one of them. Alright, my friends, hey, this has been a presentation and other presentations from Ivan's Shady Existence. Don't hate me, don't leave my Patreon, and think about joining it. It's really a club for very high IQ individuals there.
Now we're going to stick the gun in his little hand and a sword, so now he is a cyborg snail. Thank you for watching. Be sure to roundhouse kick that like button and subscribe. See you next time. Bye.